Next thing we're going to cover is the PreFlood world. So this isn't any one particular scientist, it's kind of a collection. But most of this we know from the fossil record, which I will talk about. So first, what do we know about the PreFlood world? We know that it was ridiculously verdant and full of life. We know that there were many different kinds of plant species that we don't have now. We find, for example, in Antarctica, that there is tropical plants there. In the Arctic Circle, we find tropical plants and things like that. So it was a very place that's full of life. Same with the ocean. Most fossils that we find are actually not like T-Rex or something like that. They're ocean fossils. We have metric tons of trilobites. And so when I picture, what the pre-flood world looks like, I picture something kind of like this, where it's, 20% living things by volume, basically. So God made the world a really amazingly vibrant place, and we're kind of living in the shadow of that, and I'll give you more of a sense of that later. Also, things were really big. This is a megalodon jawbone, so this is a shark the size of a school bus. And in fact, even bugs were really big. We have the remains of these ridiculously huge insects, so there's something weird going on there. And yes, there were dinosaurs. So a straightforward reading of the Bible puts humans and dinosaurs living at the same time, which kind of made me happy because I really liked Dinotopia as a kid. Yeah, so that answers that question. And okay, so that's the physical, natural world, and now we're going to move on to the people. I try not to use a lot of big words, but I really like this big word. It's called Antediluvians. It means before the flood, essentially, before the deluge. So people that lived before the flood were called the Antediluvians. We good? Okay. So we have this really dry genealogy that God decided to leave in the Bible, even though it puts everyone to sleep. But as a scientist, I find this sort of stuff actually really exciting. Anytime he starts giving me hard numbers. So it reads like this. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years and then he died. So not terribly stimulating reading by itself, but if you have a bit of an imagination. So we actually have two numbers referenced here, so we know that these are actually in a consistent timeline. So like if you add a bunch of generations in between, it doesn't change because it says when Methuselah had lived this long. Anyways, so the chart above, each row is one lifetime, one generation. So we start with Adam, who was at 930 years. So Methuselah is not an outlier. He's pretty normal, actually. And what I want you to notice is that any vertical slice that you take there is a particular point in time. So look at how many generations are alive at one time. So like when Methuselah was alive, Adam was still alive. So Methuselah could have asked Adam, hey, Adam, when you were walking in the garden, what exactly was it that happened there? And Adam could tell him. Right? Think about that. This is Jared to be his grandfather, so it's his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather who's still alive. We have 7 or 8 generations alive at any given time. And so the idea of an oral tradition makes a ton of sense when you have the eyewitnesses still hanging around for hundreds of years. So this turns out to have some pretty crazy sociological implications. When you look at a picture Bible or something like that, the portrayal of Noah will be of this white-haired guy who looks a lot like Abraham. And that's because what we're doing is we're transposing Old Testament, Abraham and David into pre-flood. But I'm going to show you that's not appropriate to do. So if we start at year 0 with only 2 people, if you look at the most conservative estimate possible, we only have one kid every 20 years. So I suppose this would be assuming some form of birth control. One child every 20 years, you still get, by the time the flood comes around, 3 billion people on the earth. Now think about that. That's half our current population. It turns out a lot of what we take for granted about progress and science and technology actually is a function of our population, because you need a lot of specialists to memorize these things. So they could easily have had the same tech level as us. These are not, sheep herding nomadic people. They could, have cities of 10 million people easily. And the second thing is, Noah was not a white-haired guy. There's biological reasons for thinking this. So there's a movie I'd love you guys to see. It's called In Time. That's kind of a bad name, but the concept is that basically people don't age. And so the line for this picture is, this is my mother, my wife, and my daughter. And they all look the same age. Basically, everyone would end up looking around 25-ish, because that's our genetic programming. We come up to kind of young adult physical level, and then our body will try and maintain that state for as long as possible. The only reason we start taking on signs of aging is because of genetic breakdown, which I will also get to in this presentation. Okay, so just to sanity check these numbers, if you had one narcissist that came around and decided that he wanted to make an entire culture of his own descendants, having one child every 3 years, still not terribly ambitious, it only takes 700 years to reach 1 billion descendants. So the person could still be alive when they had 1 billion descendants. You got to think about that. So the other thing you got to think about is, what can you do with that? So let's just kind of use our imaginations to go through a what-if scenario. This is usually people's favorite part. So Al-Jazari lived in 1136, and he was working with robotics. What if he was working with robotics for 875 years instead of the 70 that he had? People like Da Vinci just got started when they died of old age or sickness or these sorts of things. What could you do with Beethoven and synthesizers? And he'd still have 659 years left, so he wouldn't even be middle-aged yet, right? Then you can start talking about super teams. Put Tesla, Edison, Einstein, Newton, Da Vinci, Pascal, Kelvin, and put them all on a team together and have them develop technology, right? What if you had time to get a PhD in physics, chemistry, biology, zoology, astronomy, theology, mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering? What could you do with that, right? And this is really an exercise for the imagination, because we don't know, right? But I think you could do some pretty amazing things. So at the end of the flood, you'd have the 900-year-olds, you'd have 32,000 natural geniuses. There's actually good reason to think that they're even more intelligent than us. And, they have at least 3 billion descendants to build things for them. So what could you do with that? Well, sorry to be a downer for you, but there's another way of phrasing this question. This is really about power, right? These people are very powerful, particularly the elders. So what do humans do with power? This is one of the largest displays of, I think the largest display of power that the human race has ever made is not creative but destructive. We fight wars. I want you to think about our concept of war as it relates to age. So if you're someone who's already lived 700 years, do you really think a 20-year-old is like the same kind of thing that you are? Like, are they even really the same species? It would be much easier to devalue human life when there's a lot of it, and there's this big gap between people that were just born this century and people that have had a long time to establish a power base. And here's another disturbing thought. This guy, hopefully I don't need to point out who he is, said that he wanted to establish a German Reich that would last 1,000 years. That was his goal. His stated goal was to create an empire that would last 1,000 years. If he were antediluvian, he could be around for the whole thing. So that's not a particularly comforting thought. So this is what the Bible says about it. It says, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of human race had become on the earth, that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." I mean, the Bible's got some pretty big blanket statements, but this one's a real doozy. Only evil all the time. So, put in this context, when God sends the flood, he's not wiping out some nomadic sheep herders that might be bowing down to the wrong idols. This is a really serious problem. And it cuts right back to the core of free will. That if God gives us more, we do more bad with it.